Hello, Guardians, and welcome to episode 110 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny podcast dedicated to the PvE sandbox. This week, I'm joined by my usual Titan and Warlock pals, Saint and Impetus, as we take another deep dive into some weapon breakdowns. Impetus, how are you doing, and what have you been up to?
I'm doing well, Court. We've been running a lot of Grandmaster Nightfalls for the newly juiced Wild style down there in the Fallen Saber on the Cosmodrome. It's been good. I have acquired some of the roles that I've been chasing. I did get a Reconstruction Vorpal role, and then I got a Disorienting / Spike Grenade, and then Reconstruction and One for All role that's been really nice. I really actually like the double fire grenade launchers for disorienting grenades. I find that I can get a wider radius with the two-shot for getting a crowd of ads blinded, so that's been really nice to play with. Been working on unlocking some red borders for Aberrant Action and Corrasion. I haven't completed all of the weekly story quests yet, so I'll be finishing that up here before next Tuesday. But I have gotten both of those weapons to drop, so they're unlocked in collections, and I've gotten to fire with them a little bit. I love the ADS animation for Aberrant Action, and Corrasion's pretty nice to shoot with. I do love those heavy burst pulse rifles, but I'm still working on getting more of them of the red varieties so that I can unlock both of them for crafting. Saint, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's been a trial this week. Literally, I've played a bunch of trials, and then also just way too much Crucible, honestly, for somebody that does a PvE show. You know, it's a lot, but I was rewarded with some pretty good weapons, so it was worth it in the end. Done a few GMs, don't quite have all those wild style roles that I'm looking for, but I know I've got some ciphers stacked up and a bunch of Vanguard engrams sitting there, so I have to do a few more runs of that, cash them out. Another GM I feel like that's really not too bad this whole season so far. Yeah, none of these have really felt too hard. I would highly encourage you, if you have not, you've never been a Conqueror, if you've never really done a bunch of GMs before, to give it a try this season, because it's a good time to be running GMs. But I would say that's about it. Way too much Crucible, a little bit of GMs and seasonal story stuff, like you were talking about, Impetus, trying to get some more of those red borders. I'm at 3 out of 5 on each of those, so doing pretty good, getting some good progress on that already. I used up too many of my deep sight harmonizers on raid weapons, which I don't regret, but I'd kind of like to craft that sidearm real quick, so having some second thoughts about that. But all to say, pretty good week. Court, how you been, man?
Not bad, thank you. Yeah, doing some GMs, getting some wild cell rolls. The one that I am currently keeping is a Spike Grenades Envious Assassin / Reconstruction with bait and switch. I did want a Vorpal roll as well, but it kept giving me bait and switch, which I'm fine with. But yeah, Envious Assassin or Reconstruction is a nice kind of combo roll if I want to just be a bit lazy and have Reconstruction proc all the time, or if I want to slay out and try to get 3 in the mag with Envious Assassin. And I did manage to get the new sidearm, which we'll be talking about later on in this episode. Got that crafted. I'll talk about some roles that I'm thinking of later, and working towards getting the Corrasion one done as well. Outside of Destiny, been playing some Grand Theft Auto 4 during the down periods. Very fun to go back to. It's a bit with modern PCs, it doesn't tend to play a lot well, which is a bit peculiar, because I can go back to like games from the early 2000s and they run absolutely fine on Windows 10 on my on my PC, but outside of the bugs and kind of infinite loading screen glitches and all that, it's been fun to go back and play Grand Theft Auto and its expansion packs. And I do fully intend to replay Grand Theft Auto 5 soon, maybe sometime later in the year, and do another run of Red Dead Redemption 2. So busy. I think probably after this episode, I'll have the damage stacking infographic out as well, because I know people have been asking for that. Just be taking a little bit of a break between my last one and this one being kind of a redesign compared to season 23. So that'll be out soon as well. Impetus, who do we have to thank this week?
Well, you know who else has been busy? Our Patreon. My goodness, we have a ton of new patrons to thank here, and this is up to date as of today's recording, which is on July 21st. So without further ado, thank you to our new patrons, Zugashi, Bryce, Badger, Baron Van Beard, Emblo, Megarami, Patient Wolf, and then the folks that go by their real names in Patreon. I'll just shout you out by your first, Paul, Matthew, and John A. Thank you so much. Of course, we also have to give a shout out to our Grandmasters each and every episode. Those are Dark Wizard 85, David, Deacon, I'm K. Rose, Jellied Puppy, The Shazzle, The Puckster, The Mirror, and This Moment. Thank you so much, folks, for your support. That means a lot. Lets us know that we're on the right track, that we're covering the right stuff, and we hope we're bringing you a lot of value. Additionally, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials or via our Discord server, our Twitter account, that's Pod versus Enemies, or our Patreon. You can find links in the show notes, and of course, positive, critical, and constructive feedback helps with the trajectory of the podcast and how we present and break down builds, activities, and so many weapons in the PvE sandbox for all kinds of Destiny players. We do want to extend a special thanks and appreciation to everyone that supports PvE by downloading, listening, and discussing the show, and directly supporting us via Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, if you would like to support us, you can click on the link to Patreon found in the show notes of this episode. You'll get access to members-only channels in our Discord server, behind-the-scenes content, text write-ups of weapon breakdowns, input on the future of the show, and so much more. All right, Saint, what are we talking about today?
We are going to be doing the second half of our playlist weapon breakdown. So playlist weapons part 2, which is going to include some of the Crucible and comp weapons like we were just talking about, as well as some of our new weapons that have just been added in with Act 2 of Episode 1. And yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. We got a lot of spicy stuff to cover here. A few housekeeping notes and things like that before we get in. Shout out to Nems for another absolute banger of an intro song. Really grateful for the work that he does for the show. It is awesome to have just custom, personalized music, and Nems just keeps coming through on that. We also want to give a shout out to the fact that we thought that the aggressive scout buff was happening in this past week's update, and that was not the case. This is going to come out along with all the reserve mod changes next month in the month of August, which a little sad, but we proceed. Aggressive scout buff is still on the way, so we're grateful for that. Also, new stuff up on Patreon. There have been additions for posterity for the Deep Stone Crypt weapon set. Impetus, I know you've been working on a bunch of those weapons from Deep Stone Crypt just because we reference them so much. It's such a strong set. It's a
great set.
Yeah, great stuff to have reference there. Also had breakdowns go up for Scintillation and Better Devils from our last episode, so write-up recaps for all those. And many more weapons can be found over on the Weapon Breakdowns collection on the Patreon. We also had a write-in question we wanted to shout out from YouTube. I believe Dyscalculic is how I pronounce this name. Now that we have an extra row on the artifact and maybe another row in the future coming up in Act 3, what are your thoughts on potentially having the entire artifact unlocked? A lot of these perks are tied to weapon or element type and sometimes can feel arbitrary, and also the kind of annoyance of having to fiddle with the artifact and set and reset and set and reset. They were talking about having to change it just so often anytime you're changing build to build or character to character, and they're just kind of the annoyance of that, and especially with how much we have available to us. Court, where are you at on this?
So I don't necessarily agree with opening all of the artifact perks up to be active all the time. I also feel like that we've had communication in the past. It was maybe with Rodney, it was maybe with Chris or somewhere else on someone else's podcast. They've maybe talked about this before, where they can't technically have all of them active because it just wouldn't work. There'd be quotes or trademarked bad things happen if they had everything active at the same time. So I don't even if that was possible, I think it would just be way too strong to have all of these things. So I've got the artifact page up just now on the data compendium. I'm just looking at all of them, and I'm just thinking there's just no way we could have all of these active, especially in PvP as well. Like to have that technical limitation is also a bit of a help to the PvP sandbox, where they don't have all these mad temporary buffs active at the same time. So I think what people have been saying, especially like on Reddit or various Destiny community spheres, they'd love the massive quality of life update of having a loadout also save your selection of the artifact, like the 12 mods that are active. Again, I don't pretend to be a dev to say this would definitely work. It could definitely happen. I just think that would be a good quality of life update for the game. So I could, if I'm focused on a stasis subclass, I've talked about Wicked Implement in the past, I've talked about Stasis Hunter in the past, I'm looking at Creeping Chill. I like to have that on when I'm using Stasis Hunter, but obviously I turn that off when I'm not. But it's a bit of a hassle with it being in the middle of the artifact. I either have to refresh or I have to take off some of the later artifact perks to then put on Creeping Chill. It's just a bit of a faff, and the best quality of life update, I think, which would solve a lot of people's problems, is to make it so when you save a loadout in-game, it also saves your selection for the artifact. Impetus?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I would like to change about the artifact, but I just don't know if there's a technological limit. The first one that comes to mind is the fact that we still have 12 unlocks out of the artifact, even with our new row. If that is a hard limit, then I think it's going to make the row that may or may not be coming with Act 3 even more annoying, when we also consider that our Act 2's row is in place as well. If we still have 12 by the time the Act 3 row comes along, that is going to really limit and really put a lot of pressure on the choices that I make, the max of 12 choices that I have in that artifact. So I hope that number goes up, but if they can't physically do it, then I do think some other thing needs to be done with the artifact, especially for our future 2 episodes coming out. If this expanded artifact is going to be a key part of those 2 episodes. I also think for stuff like Saint's Inspiration, where it's an origin trait, we've seen this for a while now, where every season, as it used to be, and now episode, we've got an origin trait or a series of new origin traits that get buffed by some extent. I think this is the perfect thing that they could move over to the weapon mod selection. I would really like to see that kind of thing be taken out of the artifact. It's a neat idea. I want to keep playing with it, but what I have found is that that specific artifact perk gets overshadowed by a lot of the ability artifact perks, or just some of the crazier things like solo operative, kind of those column 5 stuff. Like those are the ones that I want to always save a slot for, to make sure that I have as many open options as possible. So these origin trait ones I tend to skip over, because I know that in column 4 and 5 there's going to be something crazy strong in there that I want to save one of my 12 unlocks for. But I would still like to play with these Saint Inspiration style origin trait ones, and I'd much rather have the ability to use them as a weapon mod than an artifact perk. So I think that's one way we could get around that, is start taking a few of them out of the artifact and putting them into weapon mods. Again, Bungie has said that they are expanding the weapon mod system. We don't know what shape that's going to take. I hope something like Saint's Inspiration shows up in there. Some variant of when you get a kill with the weapon in question, the origin trait's duration gets increased by X amount of seconds, or the stat increase gets bumped by 5 or 10 based on what action you need to take with the weapon. That feels like an appropriate weapon mod, not an artifact feature or unlock, however you want to describe it there. But yeah, it is definitely fiddly. It is a little bit inconvenient. Again, I'm not really thinking of it as through the lens of an instant loadout swap, because I'm rarely doing that in my moment-to-moment gameplay. But yeah, getting set for a GM, in the case of what I've been doing this last week, it has been kind of annoying to remember, oh shoot, I'm on a different build. I need to go make sure that I'm taking advantage of our new row of artifact perks, because I am actually using a sniper, or I have a solar sniper, or I have a solar weapon, and I want to make sure that I'm taking advantage of solar fulmination, and I forgot to swap to it, and now my loadout's locked. Yeah, I get it. It's very much inconvenient. Saint, what are your thoughts on it?
So I got two thoughts here. One of them is really going off of kind of what you were just talking about with the weapon mods, and this may sound crazy to some people, but I consider the idea of what if we moved champion mods back to weapons in the weapon mod slot and got rid of that entire column of mods, and essentially you just had temporary mods that were on your character in your inventory. I believe this is like a thing that is possible to do in the game, because the blinding light mod on your ghost always would say expires at the end of whatever season, and that never happened. But that text in there, and that like part of that makes me think that there is a mechanic that they have like in the game to do that, and being able to just put the weapon champion counters as a mod on the weapon these days, I don't think is like that crazy, even though that's going way back to how we originally started in Shadowkeep. Times have changed a lot. The other thing that I was going to say is, one of the things that I find the most tedious out of everything that we've talked about is resetting the weapon champion counters, and kind of going back to the mod set. But what if, instead of having to select an array of those, it's not like being able to select multiple primary weapon types that can counter different kinds of champions is creating any sort of power creep, right? Versus I think Court, your original, mentioned at the beginning of this of, well, if you could just unlock everything in column 4 and 5, that's kind of really overpowered. Nobody's going to get super OP by being able to have all of the weapon counters accessible to them at any given time. So what if those were all just automatically unlocked? As you unlock that first row of the artifact, they just all get unlocked. And, not that you need that many more unlocks. So instead of, I don't know, whatever it is, 12 unlocks now, right? And that usually essentially equates to a few in the fourth column and 2 in the final column. I don't even care if we only net, end up getting a single more, artifact unlock. So if we went to, instead of 12 unlocks, maybe we went down to 9, but that whole first row is free. I think I would be okay with that, because then it feels like the things that I'm choosing have more of an impact. Also, to Impetus, your point of, I don't want to choose these artifact or these origin trait enhancers. They're cool, but going back and reselecting them, again, is like some of the most tedious part, versus when you compare that to all these other options that increase your sniper damage, the size of your ignition, or chill targets when you kill them with stasis weapons and effects, and all these other things that are just like actual gameplay changing features. So yeah, I definitely think that there's something to do with the weapon mods and the champion counters, and making that less of a thing, or maybe the origin trait stuff like you mentioned. Just trying to move from there.
I certainly do agree with Imp's point of view about shifting those origin traits, and even like what are these mods, like the elemental charge, like does that really need to be an active artifact perk? Or like authorized mods scavenger, like, okay, maybe I don't know how they would practically make it, but like if it was attached to an activity, or if it's like if they just made it like cost 1 for that particular act or episode, I'd be fine with that. It doesn't need to be on the artifact. But the main question I would have for you, Saint, because you should suggest putting it back to onto the weapons, how would that affect exotic weapons? Because exotics don't have a weapon mod slot, and I think I'm under the impression that either 2 ways of, 1, technically they can't get 1, or 2, they're balanced in a way that, I don't think you'd ever have, Quicksilver Storm would ever have a weapon mod slot, so you can put on one of the, well, we don't know any of the newer mods that are coming in the future, but yeah. I could never see like Quicksilver Storm ever having a weapon slot mod anyway. So
yeah, it's a good point.
If we do go back to the Shadowkeep days, which, they were certainly an experience, I having to attach a champion counter onto one weapon was one of my like biggest grievances with the system, and now that's been expanded out, yeah, sure, it's evolved, it's adapted. So your elemental perks like Jolt and Radiant and Volatile rounds, they do just naturally apply to weapons anyway. But that would be my like kind of big question mark of how would this work for if you wanted to use Osteo Striga as a we've got S&G this year,
anti-barrier,
yeah, for barrier. How would that work for Osteo?
Yeah, it's a good counter, Court. So yeah, let's just go with all the weapon champion counter mods are free. Or if like the cheapest, simplest thing that they could do is like just at least give us one more unlock per row of the artifact that we're getting. So you have 12 and then you get 13. And then at the final act of the season, you get 14, right? I mean, I think that opens it up for more power creep, but it would at least be something that would be I would imagine is a relatively low effort fix versus some of the other stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I'd be okay with them just making all of the because it's very clear every season they want a particular meta to be the in thing. Like this act 2 is very sniper focused. Act 1, I suppose you could say it was sword was the focus, even though sword's not exactly the meta, but they always go for some curated mix here. Like last season we had the sidearms because that was the new thing. It was the new rocket sidearm with Indebted Kindness. This season again we've got Unstoppable Sidearm, we've got Unstoppable Scout, Overload Hand Cannon, Anti-Barrier SMG, and Pulse, and obviously Sniper Rifle as well. So it's clear that they want some particular meta to be kind of omnipresent throughout the episode. So why don't you just make it free in the first place? Again, that's I'm not thinking about like the technical limitations. So just have it active within the artifact as soon as you get the new artifact drop for you. But yeah, be curious where they might go with that. I think they do need. Again, we've come a long way since Shadowkeep when we first got our artifact back then. I remember, I think Column 2 had the Glimmer perks or mods back then they were called, where you'd go into a certain activity, you'd get an increased Glimmer, or you'd shoot Vex, you get more Glimmer.
Hey, you can bring those back. That sounds just fine to me right now. I'll tell you what.
Actually, yeah, no, can we bring those back?
Well, some of that's now been moved over to our ghosts.
It's not doing enough. I can tell you right now, after all those GMs, it's not doing enough.
Where's that Omega Ultra Glimmer Booster 200%? You know what I'm saying? Where's that at?
I think I've still got some of those mod icons in my Destiny spreadsheet folder, which I use for like infographic stuff. But,
that's deep lore.
Yeah, we're talking many years ago. But like, so my point there is we have evolved since then. Like Column 2 is now strictly mostly to do with origin trait, or it's like one of your elemental charge mods or whatever is reduced down to 1 cost. So it's, as with this being a live service game, it is going to keep evolving. But I think we have reached the stage where we have a very limited amount of builds, in-game builds, and we can't really specifically go in and really play around with the artifact. That's a big reason why I don't make builds surrounding the artifacts, because I know they're temporary, and I don't tend to really mess around with the artifacts. If I can see what's really performing well for me, that's it for the rest of it. That's just a personal preference for me anyway. But
like you pick your artifact mods and you're just running that set for most
that's it. That's it for the.
I hear you.
Other than like the example I gave with Creep and Chill, because I want to use that with a stasis subclass just to really amplify stasis. But beyond that, like I hardly take off something like galvanic armor because I'm on Arc Hunter a lot these days. I've tweaked around with the sniper mods, but even after a week now that we've had these, I'm thinking, well, incendiary rifle rounds is really fun. Solar fulmination is a lot of fun as well. But is it for me personally as fun as running around with Creeping Chill or Radiant Orbs? So the 12 cap does impact me quite a lot, as it will for a lot of players.
Yeah, that one just does not make sense to me, and that's why I wonder if there is a technical limit. I would think we would have gotten a total of 13 unlock options with this extra row, but we didn't. So now I'm getting worried, because if we have an additional row in Act 3 and we're still at 12 unlocks, it's not going to feel like build crafting so much as punishing. Like in a way, we would have to go back to that style where champion mods were added to the weapon specifically, where before I launch into every activity, I have to meticulously go through my artifact to make sure that it is tailored to the exact loadout I am planning to bring into that activity. And that's not fun. That just slows everyone down, especially when we get into fire team style activities. But yeah, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's just a case of we'll go up by some amount in Act 3. Again, I would like to have one for Act 2, but this isn't going to be that long of an act, and I don't, it's not the end of the world, but it is definitely, as Discalculate said, inconvenient and a waste of time.
Yeah. Man, I tell you what, though. These new artifact mods, good.
The artifacts have been great. I mean, again, since Lightfall, I've really enjoyed the different styles of play that Bungie, the artifact team, has introduced. I don't think it's the quality of the artifact, but the way that we go about playing with the artifact, that's where I have my gripes.
Yeah, like something's got to give. I went back to using Pyrogale again, which I hadn't used in a bit, and then when it's like Char and Eruption and Ashes and Solar Fulmination, and you can just absolutely ignite everything that you can possibly see. Everything that the sun touches, is yours to explode, which is absolutely great. Plus, you got like a certain sniper rifle out there can get shield clip on it. You put anti-barrier on that. You put a unstopped weapon in your energy slot. All of a sudden, you got all the champs covered easy. You can even run double special and cover all the champs, which is wild. But
you don't even need another weapon, because slow turns into freeze, which shatters.
Actually, really, that's true. You could just shoot 3 shots. It's really nuts.
I'm not against that, because I'm like, that's a lot of setup, and it's a sniper. Snipers are getting the flinch reduced in PvE in August, as far as I'm aware. But like, still a lot of setup. Snipers are not the best at the moment in the sandbox. Yes, we've got these fancy new artifact mods, but I'm fine with that in terms of like a balance point of view. But yeah, the actual new, to Imp's point there about the new artifact perks, they are very fun. There's a lot of fun. It's just such a hassle to try and like go back and forth, like, because we've been using the Act 1, the initial set of artifact perks, to then keep going back and forth from like galvanic armor. Right, I need to turn that off to then put incendiary rounds and solar fulmination. If I want to use sniper's meditation, it's just so much faff, and that's why I'm just like, you know what, I'm good. I don't need to swap. I might be missing out on the fun incendiary rifle rounds, but I can't be arsed. Can't be fussed with this swapping back and forth, to be honest.
I'm going to go ahead and mute Discalculate on the YouTube channel just so we don't drag out these episodes by an additional 20 minutes. Is that okay with you guys?
Well, it's the problem. You start asking good questions, and then it's 20 minutes later.
It's disastrous, yeah. Great question, Discalculate. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that. Now let's get on to the main topic of the episode. We didn't forget it, I promise. We are covering weapons. We're breaking them down. It's the Crucible Suite plus our Act 2 weapons here. So we will be doing full reviews of the following: the Riposte, Aisha's Care, Shayura's Wrath, Corrasion, and Aberrant Action. We were planning on covering Perfect Paradox, but it doesn't look like it's actually dropping in the game despite being quote-unquote released at the start of Act 2, so that will be on the docket for a future episode whenever we can actually play with the gun. So no breakdown there. And without further ado, let's get into our Crucible/Trials weapons. We do have our origin traits as always here. One quiet moment for all non-Iron Banner weapons. While out of combat, you gain a plus 20 handling, plus 40 reload speed, and a 0.95 times reload duration multiplier. And of course, out of combat refers to not having dealt or received damage within the last 5 seconds. Kills reduce this to 1.5 seconds until damage is dealt or received. Now, for the Trials weapons that we're going to be covering, they, of course, have an additional origin trait, Alacrity. While you are the last Guardian standing, as in that message is flashing on your screen, or in a activity by yourself, solo, you gain plus 20 range, plus 20 stability, plus 50 reload speed, and plus 10 aim assist. The solo activity does include lost sectors, solo strikes, solo dungeons, etc. So it is not just a PvP origin trait, it's also a quite strong PvE origin trait when you are playing a solo activity. Our first weapon, the Riposte. This is our comp weapon for this episode, and it has stocks instead of origin traits at the very end of that weapon there. This is also our new and only legendary lightweight frame auto rifle, but it does fire at the same RPM as a rapid fire auto rifle, but it does come with different benefits of the more traditional lightweight frame here. So it does get that intrinsic passive of a plus 20 to your mobility and a 6.25% forward movement speed bonus. This is a void lightweight auto rifle in particular here. So with the new frame, of course, whenever we read off these stats and do our stat comparison, you just got to bear in mind it's not a 1-to-1 here, but we thought it would be best to compare it with a rapid fire, since that is the closest that it fires to, and the stat package is very similar. So we are going to compare this to Rufus's Fury from Root of Nightmares, just for an idea here. And the stat package is remarkably similar. Both have a range of 34 is your number here, and that translates to about 15 meters when you're in hipfire and 24 meters aim down sights before a damage drop-off. Stability-wise, it's 52 versus 58. And then the handling here, again, rapid fires and also lightweights have superb handling here. In the case of Riposte versus Rufus's Fury, it is 50 versus 41. So Riposte boasts a 0.38 ready, a 0.30 ADS, and a 0.35 second stow speed. Reload 51 versus 50, that translates to about 1.79 seconds at base for Riposte to reload. And it boasts a recoil direction of 66. Saint, how did you feel a 66 recoil direction? Again, this has a deterministic recoil, so I can't even say a 66 recoil direction, because that doesn't mean anything anymore. How did you feel that the deterministic recoil of the Riposte felt for controller players?
It's not great. I'll be honest with you. It kind of evens out a little bit, but yeah, the start of the pattern is like really unwieldy. It just like wraps back and forth and the first, third-ish of the magazine. And you can kind of get around that. And there's a couple ways that you could bump up your recoil direction, but I don't even think that is making like that huge of a difference. The rolls that I have had have been like base or plus 10 recoil direction, or alternatively the stock that gives plus 20. Maybe the plus 20 started to feel like a little bit better, but generally not great. I found out my way to get around that is to just use a roll that has pretty high stability, and then it doesn't feel so bad. That you can kind of manage the recoil a little bit better when it's just not. Even if the pattern is good, if the gun is more stable, it won't feel as bad. So I definitely am interested in having pretty high stability here. I will say I use this, so again, played way too much Crucible this week. The aim assist on this thing is quite high, and that can also make up for the the recoil pattern in like the Crucible when you have targeting, and the same thing goes for like PvE, right? There is like that bit of aim assist and all that going on. Bullet magnetism, I believe, is the proper term, because the aim assist sits at like 76 at base. So yeah, it's not great. There's a couple things that can kind of even it out though, make it not that bad.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stability related perks on this weapon in columns 3 and 4, and not to say anything of our barrels and our mag choices, as well as our stock options here. Again, this is a PvP focused weapon, being the comp drop, so making sure that you are not too flinched off of targets is certainly a priority here, and very evident. But when we look at our barrels in our magazines here, For PvE specifically, again, if the recoil direction is a huge problem here, we don't have a lot of like headshot related perks that we need to worry about in Calm 4 as far as damage perks go. It's mostly just kill and damage related stuff. So headshots don't need to be a huge priority for the effectiveness of this weapon. Of course, we always do want to make sure that we are aiming for precision shots as much as possible here. So if stability is an issue, I think something like polygonal, small bore, fluted would be right up your alley here. Me speaking personally, that 24 meters ADS before the damage fall off. Granted, on auto rifles, it is a pretty gradual fall off. It's not quite as steep. I would still like to give the range stat a little bit of a boost, speaking as an M&K player. So small bore would probably be my preference here. I'd be fine with corkscrew. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to commit so heavily into, say, hammer forge or full bore that I want to tank other stats or just only focus on range. But a small boost there would be nice as well. We do have our rounds perks in column 2, and those are definitely my priority. Armor piercing rounds, high caliber rounds, ricochet rounds being my number 1, I think would be really nice there. Just by itself, ricochet rounds is going to take you all the way up to 62 stability and 39 range, which doesn't add a ton. It just takes you up to 25 meters ADS before damage fall off, but that is a nice band to work with here. Again, we have additional stat boosts coming with our stocks as well, so we always need to keep that in mind. Moving on to column 3 and 4, though, we do have some void-related options. We got Repulsor Brace in column 3, always wonderful to see that. We have Enlightened Action to help with our reload speed and handling. That will be a massive bump once you get to those higher stacks here. And it's 1 stack per the automatic weapon here, because that is dependent rather on the weapon type. I suppose we could also go for Killing Wind, not a huge PvE perk, but it definitely would be easy to proc in PvE. On the weapon kill, you do gain plus 40 handling and plus 20 range, but also your damage fall off distance is increased by about 5%. So that could be something that'd be nice to stack, but I think I would still prefer Repulsor Brace and then Enlightened Action as my number 1 and number 2 picks there. Column 4, Destabilizing Rounds are jelly to the peanut butter of Repulsor Brace. We do have Target Lock, which I think is probably a little bit more useful in PvP, not so much in PvE. Again, if you get flinched off there, you are immediately restarting that timer or that counter for Target Lock. Probably not worth it as well, especially not when we have Desperate Measures, which is my number 1 pick for column 4. Again, such a flexible damage perk, especially with Prismatic now available here. Grenade or melee kills, granting that additional damage, getting to those higher tiers. They do not need to match your current super or subclass. Really, really wonderful there. And again, with the additional ability kill there, going all the way up to Desperate Measures times 3, we're looking at a 30% damage bump, which is quite hefty. Very, very solid here. And I would probably want a Repulsor Brace or Enlightened Action with Desperate Measures roll there as my column 3 and 4 pairing. Now, stocks as well. Got to give a shout out to our 4 stocks here. If you are really struggling with the recoil direction and the stability, as Saint was talking about, fitted stock is going to be the one that really helps there. That's a plus 10 to your stability and a plus 20 to your recoil direction. But it does come with a small handling penalty. It's just minus 5. Nothing crazy. Again, if, for example, you got a roll with fitted stock and Enlightened Action is going to help you out immediately as soon as you get a stack to immediately cover up for that minus 5 handling penalty. Personally, I think I am just looking for, I could take fitted stock, but I would much rather just have a bump to my handling with short action stock or composite stock, for example, which is just giving me a plus 5 to stability and plus 5 to handling compared to short action just giving a straight up plus 15 handling. Again, we have something like, if you don't get fluted, for example, but you get short action is my logic there, then I can still get a good bump to my handling to make the weapon feel even snappier. So, yeah, I think the role that I'm chasing in comp, and again, this is low down on my list just because of the other void auto rifles that I have in my vault. I would ideally love a small bore, ricochet rounds, repulsor brace, desperate measures, and a short action stock there for a nice 46 range, 69 stability, 65 handling weapon. On the Masterwork side, I'll take extra handling. I'll take extra reload speed. Again, these are pretty snappy feeling, nice primaries. I don't have a specific pick here, but that's just kind of off the dome here what I'm looking for. Court, is there a specific role that you're chasing here?
So at least for hunters, again, it's going to be that bog standard repulsive brace. You don't need destabilizing rounds if you're on your falcons. That's just too it's rather redundant because your weapon's already going to be applying volatility anyway. So ideally you want to get something like Desperate Measures, but I mean, with this being a comp weapon, you might not be getting as many rolls, or you not as lucky. It's not something that you can go out and craft. So target lock's still an okay perk, I guess. But yeah, ideally Desperate Measures with Repulsor Brace. I think over on the Titan side, I've mentioned this before, when it comes to destabilizing rounds where it may be more effective, not that they need Repulsor Brace, it's the inverse. So not Repulsor Brace, but with destabilizing rounds for our Void Titans with Controlled Demo. That is my kind of go-to aspect for Void Titans. Just a lot of explosions, but a lot of healing for you and your nearby allies. And yeah, really just in column 3, if you're in that, if you're going for something like that, then Enlightened Action, even Zen Moment or Killing Winds for PvE Sandbox. But yeah, pretty short and sweet in terms of what I'm looking for. Saint, you got anything specifically for controller players as well?
Yeah, something. First thing I'll say, like I mentioned a minute ago, you probably want a pretty good stability stat. There's a lot of ways to pump that stat up, but I would try to aim for like 70 plus stability if you're not assisting the recoil direction or anything like that, or even if you are, you probably want some pretty high stability. There's a couple things that I think are strange about this weapon. The first one I'll say is I believe what the curated role is from doing your placement match quest is Hammerforge, High Cal, Killing Wind, Desperate Measures, and Fitted Stock. So even if you don't want to play a ton of Crucible, you can go play comp for 7 matches. Just do what you can, and you'll be rewarded with a pretty solid role. And Killing Wind is not a trait that we recommend for PvE. I mean, like hardly ever. But on this weapon, and the role that I was using it with earlier was like just really no range increases whatsoever, except for like 5 from ricochet rounds, and that's pointing you at maybe 25 meters, right? It's like really not a ton. The kicker on that though is that when you trigger Killing Wind, you're getting 50 mobility. It's fine. Probably more valuable if you're a hunter, honestly, and you want your dodge decreased down if you're not running, super high mobility stat. But you also get that 40 handling, 20 range, and a 5% on your damage fall off. So going from 25 meters of base effective range and activating Killing Wind puts you up to like 30.5 meters, which, man, 5.5 meters is significant. That is nothing to scoff at. And I thought that I would be more concerned about the reload speed with this weapon, but I got to go back and test this. But I have this feeling that there is some sort of the rapid fire frame at work here, like how you have something like Luna's House, a 140 that shoots like a 180, but then it also gets that in-air benefit of accuracy, I believe. I think that something similar is going on here, and this could just be, I don't know, in my mind, but it feels like it has that rapid fire, slight scaler on reload when you empty the mag. And that has made me, I'd have to go back and actually do some testing on this to be sure, but the reload does not feel bad at all. And it does not have me thinking that Enlightened Action is like a super necessary trait. So if I'm playing on Titan, I may go Repulsor Brace for offensive Bulwark, just because of the way that increases your ability regen on offensive Bulwark. Whenever you have a overshield up, you're getting like 4x grenade regen and like 100% increase to your melee damage as well as melee range. So just a ton of benefits there on offensive Bulwark. And you could be comparing that with Controlled Demo. Like Court was saying, you're getting a lot more value out of destabilizing rounds on your Titan. This trait can also be enhanced. This weapon can be enhanced. That cuts the timer down on destabilizing rounds cooldown, I believe. I can't remember the exact times on that, but typically destabilizing rounds is like a 3-second cooldown, and I believe that the enhanced version cuts that down just a little bit. So Yeah, it's a pretty solid weapon. I've been enjoying killing one way more than I thought that I would with destabilizing rounds and using that on like a Void Titan build. But yeah, I'll probably keep playing at least for the next few weeks, running a few characters through, trying to get that classic repulsor brace and destabilizing combo with how good that is feeling these days. And yeah, running a roll with like 90 stability and like 40 range it seems like incredibly low, but if you have Killing Wind, it totally makes up for that lacking range stat, which is really nice. And yeah, I don't know, just unusual to value that on a weapon here. But given its trade set, I think it's pretty solid. That's about all I got for that. Pretty solid weapon. The last rapid fire void auto we had added to the game, by the way, was Reckless Oracle. And if you don't know what that is, I don't blame you. It came out with Garden of Salvation back when you still had to slot anti-champion weapon mods.
Yeah,
weapons themselves.
Way to bring the mood down, Saint. That was awesome.
Yeah. I was just looking at our current selection of voids, alt rifles, and yeah, I mean, it's quite bare bones to go from like season 8 to Gnawing Hunger, which is basically maybe outside of Rosarago, the most omnipresent weapon we've had for a while. We've got Positive Outlook in season 21, and then Age Old Bond, High Impact for Last Wish. So yeah, like hopefully we get some sort of Garden of Salvation refresh to get that lovely Reckless Oracle, but yeah, this is our best option at the moment. If you prefer faster firing auto rifles, obviously Rosarago's dropping quite frequently currently anyway, but that is our adaptive frame, and it doesn't have destabilizing round, but it does have repulsor brace.
I think there's a few friends of ours that ears just started burning because you uttered the words Garden of Salvation refresh. But
I mean, you mentioned Garden first.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I'll take it.
Hopefully.
Honestly, pretty good for a weapon that is clearly Crucible focused. Pretty decent PvE utility. And if you really liked Reckless Oracle back in the day, you've been playing the game for a long time, and you're tired of using Mulligan Swashbuckler, then hey, maybe go grab a destabilizing rounds roll of this thing. It's pretty fun. Disparate Measures, yeah, really high damage output. Not quite Onslaught on the Rosarago like you mentioned, but still, 30%, easy to trigger like Impetus is saying. It's solid, man.
All right. Well, I'll take the next one. That is Aisha's Care. That is our Strand Heavy Burst Pulse Rifles. So we're getting quite a collection of Heavy Burst Pulse Rifles. We'll talk about another one shortly as well. As a reminder, so Heavy Burst kind of frame bonus, it fires 2-round burst. Think of Graviton Lance. And it grants a small amount of flinch resistance while aiming down sight. Aisha's Care obviously rolls with Alacrity and One Quiet Moment, but also rolls with Omolon Fluid Dynamics, and that is the upper 50% of the magazine has up to 20 stability and 30 reload, and these benefits decrease linearly as the magazine count approaches 50% capacity. So yeah, we're going to compare this with Nullify, which is the Salvation's Edge Heavy Burst, and Corrasion, which is our Echo's Heavy Burst. So it's a range of 80 versus 79 versus 75. So Aisha's has a 22 meter hip fire and a 37.4 meter aiming down sight range fall off. So our stability is 39 versus 36 versus 32. Handling is 33 versus 29 versus 33, which equates to a 0.44 second ready, or a 0.39 second ADS speed, or a 0.43 second stow speed. So quite fast indeed in terms of handling. And then reload is 40 versus 45 versus 36, and that equates to, at base anyway, a 2.05 seconds reload. And the recoil of direction here is 75. So yeah, this is our one of 3 pulse rifles that we'll be talking about in kind of relatively close order, the second which is later in this episode. Then we'll talk about Nullify in a future episode. But with this being a heavy burst, it's all about the range. You do not need to focus anything to do with range with this. It's got quite a nice healthy range. Pulse rifles got a very recent buff at the start of the final shape, so they're doing really well. But specifically this subclass this archetype of pulse rifles they are smacking quite hard. I've been playing a lot with Nullify and Corrasion versus this one, but I think all three are doing really great performance-wise. So looking at the stability across all of these weapons, at least on PC, I haven't had any need to really focus on stability. So I think it's just another kind of weapon that you want to focus on handling, just to really up the swapping to speed and then aiming down sight speed. So again, I think this is going to be another kind of either arrowhead break. See here, we've got fluted barrel for a little bit of stability, but you also get that plus 15 handling. So, arrowhead break, fluted barrel. If you can luck those out, with this being a trials drop, then that would be your go-to for your barrel. Over on the magazine side, this has got your kind of classic, your sort of tier 1 magazine selection. So you've got armor piercing, you've got high cal rounds, and you've got ricochet rounds. If you could get one of those three, be doing really well. With this being a pulse rifle anti-barrier episodes, your armor piercing rounds does do the extra damage to that. It's 5% increased damage to all PvE combatant shields, and you do get that over penetration by 1 time through different tiers of enemies. Over on the main kind of selection of perks for columns 3 and 4, we do have Sever. We do have Slice, which applies Sever. Again, I've said this in the past with, in regards to hunters, this is more of an applicable subclass effect because you've got your class up all the time. I'm not dismissing this for Titans and Warlocks, but this would be your go-to if you want some sort of applying Sever at a kind of longer range. Do really well, especially against your champions. You'll be going up against those in quite a few activities. Outside of that, you've got Keep Away, which, it does apply well here. Again, the range stat of base 80. You've got, when you're aiming down sight, the damage fall off is 37.4 meter. So, you've got a huge amount of range of staying away from your enemies. Keep Away is within 15 meters, it grants plus 10 range, 30 reload speed, and it decreases the accuracy cone growth. It just basically tightens up your aim a smidge. You don't need the plus 10 range, but that plus 30 reload speed would be quite good to have if you want to have that. But I think, at least for me, I would be focusing on Slice if you can try and land that on Aisha's Care. For column 4, a few options here. I always say that I'm a Golden Tricorn stan, and it's here once more. Very easy to proc, with this being a strand weapon. I think all 3 classes have really good options to proc Golden Tricorn, but this isn't really a damage weapon. That's just, I like to get that 50%. I think you'd be overkilling with heavy burst pulse rifles. So if you can't luck out with Golden Tricorn, can get collective action, which applies to any of elemental pickup. It doesn't have to be tangles with this being a strand weapon. It can be your fire sprites, ionic traces, shards, and void breaches. And you've obviously got your other strand elemental perk here with Hatchling upon scoring a precision kill, which very easy to do with heavy burst pulse rifles, or 3 kills within 3 seconds of each. It spawns a threadling on enemy death location. So it's got some nice PvE perks here. I think we'll obviously be talking about Nullify and Corrasion, or Corrasion later on in this episode, so we'll have a nice kind of comparison between the two, so I won't spoil it just now. But I think out of the 3 weapons that we're talking about with Nullify, Aisha's Care, and Corrasion, I think this is the sort of least PvE focused weapon. For obvious reasons, it's a trials weapon, so it's going to be more curated towards trials. But I'm certainly not disputing the fact that you can come in and play some trials and get some rolls for Aisha's Care for the PvE sandbox. And with this being our strand option in the top slot, it's obviously a very important slot if you've got something else in comms too, like another weapon we'll be talking about very shortly, and that is one of the rocket pistols. Saying, How are you feeling with this? Have you managed to get a few rolls of this, if any?
Got a lot of trials engrams saved up because I've been putting myself through that.
But no
weekend.
Aisha's care.
Not yet. So I think I'm at like rank 9.5. We're getting there though. The solo grind's a bit of a grind, but we're on our way. The thing that I'm most keen on this roll or this weapon is, you got Slice and Hatchling. It's classic. To your point, Court, it's pretty easy to hit precision kills with this weapon type. No doubt about that. And there's a lot of good PvP perks on there, even though I don't think this weapon archetype is super strong there. But what I am really keen on is Keep Away and Desperado. And that is a strange combo, I know, but you can, when you proc Desperado, not quite as strong as it once was, but it is still a 33% increase in the weapon's RPM, taking it from the base of 300, which is like the real RPM, not 395, all the way up to 400, which, man, that is just a straight up 33% increase in DPS. And if you have looked at any of the information about this weapon or listened to us talk about this archetype in the past, 3-4 episodes, you know that it already has really strong damage output. This is not quite your onslaught, right, increase that you could get on something like Rosarago. But given that this weapon archetype is already puts out so much damage, upping it with something like Desperado is kind of crazy. And yeah, Keep Away gives another 10 points of range. Like Court said, you don't need that, but it gives 30 reload or 35 when enhanced. So if you take, let's say Flared Magwell could put you up a little bit, you're looking at like 55, and then all of a sudden you add on Keep Away, that's 85, or if you're at enhanced, you're putting a few more points on there. If you have any part of Amalon Fluid Dynamics up at the time, you could easily be getting up to 100 reload speed, which I say all that to say, I say all that because the base reload time with this weapon is like 2 seconds, 2.05 seconds, and that's not good. That's not great for a weapon that you want to be triggering a reload perk on. But yeah, if you can get reload traits, Flared Magwell, Keep Away, Reload Masterwork, Amalon Fluid Dynamics, whatever it may be, activated, even One Quiet Moment can be fine going in and out of combat there. Man, it really it can be fun. I'm playing Trials of Osiris right now. That should tell you a lot about, how much I want to give this a try. Impetus, any thoughts on our first strand heavy burst pulse?
I don't want to play Trials. No, I don't want to do that. I'm torn because on the one hand, the heavy bursts are definitely the best pulse rifle archetype for minor damage, for really just in general. They put out more damage than all the other frames. However, the second best frame is the rapid fire frame, and we do have a craftable version from a season pass, Season of the Deep, at different times. And that had, as far as the damage pool, a remarkably similar one. You had Golden Tricorn, you had Hatchling, you had Collective Action. The difference there is that different times boasts Adrenaline Junkie, whereas Aisha's boasts Desperado. And I don't, I'm looking at it, I'm weighing the stat benefits, I'm weighing the damage output, and I'm thinking, okay, I have different times unlocked. I could craft a roll of that. Or I could go into Trials and play the lottery, not have a great time. I don't know if I would even try to go and unlock the Adept version, because there's no guarantee that the Adept roll is going to be PvE related when most of this perk pool is featured for PvP. Or I could, or I could just go down to the Enclave and craft a second best roll, but tailor the barrels and the magazine and the masterwork to my liking, so that it feels decently fine. It's easy to control. What is more preferable to me, and I'm not sure yet. I do want to at least unlock this, but will I get a PvE roll when I unlock it? I don't know, and I'm not looking forward to that uncertainty. That's kind of where I'm sitting at right now. I do want to have a heavy burst in the top slot, and Aisha's is our only one that's in the top slot right now. But I also, part of me wants to wait and see if we get a kinetic or a stasis one, and will that satisfy me? But I don't know. It's just tough right now because I am not in the mood to go play trials, especially not on M&K in the PC lobbies. But I might have to do that just to get my hands on a roll and see how I feel. But I could also just wait until Aisha's is back in the Lighthouse pool so that I could just play a bunch of trials games and get drops that way. I don't know.
I think that's a good point to make, though, because if you're not keen or fond in playing trials, then don't punish yourself by trying to get this. I think, again, the point I really want to make is this has PvE perks. You can go and get this, and sure, heavy bursts are objectively the best pulse rifle for rank and file and elite enemies, but different times, if you have that behind the scenes, if you did manage to get that a few seasons ago, that's still a great alternative. This is our only option in the top slot, unless you want to count something like Revision Zero as your exotic slot option. But I think if you have those options, you've got the exotic, if you've got different times, then I think it's fair to say, you can safely skip this. This being part of a PvP focused activity, you don't necessarily need to get it. And we've got alternatives, which again, we'll talk about one of them today and the other one in a future episode, which are sure in a different slot, but they're much, well, I say easier to get in terms of the seasonal weapon, maybe not so much the raid weapon, because that does require to go and play the raids. In my case, quite a few times to get at least the craftable version. But yeah, I think a very good point there, Impetus, just with the comparison to our rapid fire option.
And we do have another strand pulse rifle currently available in Relentless. That's a high impact frame. Again, not quite as top tier as far as the frame goes, but as the perk pool and the origin trait goes, very, very solid PvE strand pulse rifle, right? No one will really bat an eye if you bring that in there, especially with a really solid roll for any end game content that we currently have this episode. So it's not like we're suffering for strand pulse rifles. Obviously, if you were playing in Season of the Deep, you do have access to a craftable version, while as Aisha's and Relentless are just enhanceable. And Belisarius, I guess, is also enhanceable, the former comp weapon. But again, yeah, not probably something a lot of us not a lot of our listeners are going out there to chase a Belisarius D right now. You've probably already got a PvE roll if you did have one, and it's really just hatchling at this point now that I look at that perk pool. Anyways, yeah, there are some options there, and I'm weighing each of those options. I'm thinking, all right, is it worth it to go into trials and go for an Aisha's as someone who doesn't really jump at the opportunity to play trials? I will play PvP when I'm in the mood for it, but that's normally Iron Banner or comp or regular Crucible. Trials, not so much. So that's why I bring those thoughts up.
I think it's better to just force yourself to play a game that you don't enjoy for hours on end and then get mad at the state of the game, honestly.
I can't believe that never occurred to me. Really. I'll have to try that. Oh, man.
Okay, let's move on to our next Trials weapon. Next up, we've got Shayura's Wrath. This is a Void Precision SMG with that minus 20% to horizontal recoil. This weapon has alacrity and one quiet moment, like we talked about, and it also has access to nadir focus. This weapon gains stacks of nadir focus for 2 seconds of firing, maxing at 5 stacks. Nadir focus grants increased range and decreased accuracy cone size. That's about 2 range and about 1.5% decreased accuracy cone for every stack that you get. So how does this weapon, it's a bit of an old weapon getting refreshed here. How does it compare to its peers? If you're looking at something like Adjudicator or maybe Unending Tempest that has, had a lot of time in the sun and still see some play. Well, Shayura's Wrath is better in every way. It just has the most juice stats that you can possibly imagine and just got an even better origin trait, which is wild. It has got 59 range, about 14 meters at hipfire, or 19.8 meters when you are ADS, 44 stability, 27 handling for zero point 0.4 ready speed, 0.3 ADS, and about 0.38 stow, and then reload speed of 24, which is honestly one of the weaker stats here. It's going to be a little over 2 seconds, 2.2 seconds on the total reload time at base, and a recoil direction at 95. So as far as precision frames go, Shayura's Wrath may have been out for a while, as still an incredibly strong weapon when compared to other precision frame SMGs. It's just real good. Whenever we are thinking about barrels and mags to grab for this thing, obviously, the PvP side to go is just maxing out the range. Not really as valuable here. I'm much more interested in attacking that really low reload speed of 2.2 seconds. That said, I am probably going to take I would say alloy mag or a flared magwell. Alloy mag being 15% instead of, 15 to a stat is going to take you all the way down to 1.87, which is already a, pretty solid jump there. And yeah, flared magwell for the plus 15. And then after that, you've got light mag, which is plus 10 to the reload speed. The barrel side, I'm maybe going to go handling, even though it has got strong handling. Within the archetype, 27 handling is not super high. I wouldn't say the recoil direction is already really high, easy to control at 95. So yeah, I'm thinking I would be going for something like fluted if you really want to push the range out to, past 20 meters. Small bore, always an option. Corkscrew for well-rounded if you want to hit all those areas. On our main traits here, in column 3, we get repulsor brace, killing wind, strategist, keep away. I think is a strange play. I'm not super interested in that here. And then all the other stuff, Zen moment and dynamic sway reduction, more recoil focused stuff. And then in the final column, tap the trigger, kill clip, destabilizing rounds, cascade point, target lock, harmony. Again, not hugely PvE focused trait set here, really looking pretty similar to the auto rifle that we were just talking about at the beginning of this episode, Comfort Ward this season. I think that there's a couple things here. This weapon also, for anybody that has an older version of this weapon, in that final column, it notably lost Golden Tricorn as well as Adrenaline Junkie, which are pretty strong PvE traits. And this thing, it definitely needs some damage help when we're looking at the PvE sandbox right now. SMGs, particularly precision frame SMGs at 600 RPMs, are not very strong and not having a ton of PvE-centric damage traits. I mean, I guess you could say harmony, is viable. Kill clip is absolutely something you can proc in PvP if you're able to get one of those higher reload speed rolls. But I think that destabilizing rounds is probably the best thing here. But unfortunately, unlike that auto rifle that we covered in the post, it is not going to be just as good as a base damage profile. Court, how you feeling? You ever been a Shayura's enjoyer? And what are you thinking about this new update?
I mean, you read my mind, because I was going to say about the 2 perks that it did lose, and very similar to the Riposte. It just feels very like this is very, very much a PvP weapon, like with the current selection of perks, some very sought after perks in column 4. But yeah, in the PvE side, this is just like a kind of watered down Riposte that we were talking about earlier in the episode. So I don't have much else to really add here other than just kind of reiterating, repulsor brace for hunters or destabilizing rounds for Titans if you can luck out with that. But beyond that, it's just not quite there for me. I mean, it's a fantastic gun overall for the PvP sandbox, but because of where SMGs are at in PvE, which I think I'm relatively fine with. SMGs had a very long time in the sun anyway. I think it's time to give them a little break and let other weapon types, especially our newer ones like aggressive scouts and heavy burst pulse rifles, a little bit of that limelight. So I'm fine with that. I certainly don't want to be too negative, because it's definitely a fantastic weapon overall. It's just not quite there for PvE. Impetus, you got any other thoughts here?
Very surprised to have Shayura's come back, if I'm perfectly honest. Again, we did get one version of it for just a season. back when Witch Queen launched, and it did have origin traits for the first time. And they also removed some very interesting PvE options, as Saint was touching on. I'll also point out that in Column 3, we lost Perpetual Motion from that Witch Queen version, which, if you look at the current Column 3, not a lot of reload options. you got Keep Away, and that's about it. And that's going to be problematic if you don't get something in Column 2 or Reload Speed Masterwork to help out with that stat. Because, again, the origin traits are certainly there to help. I don't want to discount One Quiet Moment and Alacrity, but they have very specific conditions, and with an SMG requiring you to be kind of up close and personal, I don't think you're going to be matching or meeting those conditions really to get those consistent bonuses to your reload speed. But I'm getting away from myself here. What I wanted to draw attention to was back in Witch Queen, we also got Funnel Web to come out, which was it still is a very hot Void SMG. We then got Unforgiven the season after. We've got Hero's Burden coming back, and then we're coming off of the Recluse returning as well. So I think as far as Void SMGs go, if you're looking for a PvE option, there's a really good chance you've already got something sitting in your vault that you're currently using it. I don't think for a PvE only person, there's much of a reason to go bother yourself with a Shayura's Wrath. If you definitely didn't get a Recluse, you probably were avoiding it deliberately. Or you already had a sweet Funnel Web or a Unforgiven or a Hero's Burden that was treating you just fine. So, yeah, I am not feeling any reason to go get a Shayura's because I do have a great Unforgiven. I do have a good Funnel Web. And I even had an okay Recluse that I kind of held on to just in case that origin trait really piqued my interest. So, yeah, I'm going to pass on Shayura's, to be perfectly honest. I think we're good on Void SMGs. I'm also not using SMGs at all right now, which I think is a topic for a different time. They're not hot right now, and I just don't think Shayura's is really something that interests me. Maybe you're interested in it, though, for I don't know, a repulsor destabilizing combo, but that's not a unique combo anymore. And again, SMGs aren't hot right now, so go get this for PvP and don't really worry about it for PvEs, are my final thoughts.
So to give some context on what we were talking about here, just taking a quick reference at our primary DPS output on just trying to understand a baseline of like where are these weapons in reference to each other. That weapon, the Riposte, you could get the same combo on the destabilizing repulsor brace. And look, if you're playing trials, you might as well go play comp. Okay, if you're willing to put yourself through that, just go play comp instead and get this auto rifle because it is dealing like 36.5% more damage at a baseline. And that's ridiculous. Now, if you are if you're somebody that is really invested in both sides of the sandbox and you have a roll on Shayura's, you can get a roll with Killing Wind that is hitting like 25 meters of range, which is ridiculous, especially in the current range band sandbox of SMGs. Near Deer Focus is an awesome Crucible Focus origin trait. Something like Kill Clip, you activate Kill Clip, you can absolutely shred people. Killing Wind can give you obscene range, dynamic sway, tap the trigger really good, Zen Moment, all that's really great if you want to go play some Crucible. But other than that, in the PvE sandbox, like Impetus said, there's just so many better options out there that require less effort.
All right, well, geez, I can't imagine. I mean, again, when Shayura's was still there back in Witch Queen, I don't remember if we actually covered it, but it was still a very dominant SMG. Of course, it came out as a very dominant Void SMG, but something else that came out as quite a dominant weapon would be our Act 2 weapons, both of them that we're going to talk about here. They do come with that Radiolaris Transposer origin trait, where there's a counter that goes up by scoring weapon kills within 8 seconds of each other. And upon hitting 100% on that counter, a target explodes and creates that Radiolaria pool under them. Deals elemental matching damage every 0.65 seconds for a few seconds, and the damage against those combatants in the pool scales with the combatant rank modifier, meaning that the higher the multiplier of the weapon that created the pool, the higher the damage that pool deals. And it is affected by weapon damage buffs, if you're still keeping track here. A lot of stuff going on with these fun little Radiolaria pools. That progress on that invisible counter is by combatant. So rank and file is about 34%, and everything above your rank and file reaches the counter with a single kill, it's 100%. When you stow the weapon, the counter does get reset. So that is the one big thing to note here. So Corrasion is our arc heavy burst pulse rifle. Heavy burst, as we've already said before earlier in this episode, they are meta as far as pulse rifles go. That 2-round burst, that small amount of flinch resistance while ADS, you can be dealing a ton of damage at a good amount of range here. However, Corrasion is not as statistically dominant as Aisha's Care was, nor Nullify. So again, I'll run through those stat comparisons one more time here. It's Corrasion versus Aisha's Care versus Nullify. At the range, it's 75, which is the lowest, versus 80 versus 79. Corrasion boasts a 21.63 meters before damage fall off when hipfire, and a 36.76 meters when ADS. On the stability side, Corrasion has a 32 versus 39 versus 36. Handling, it's actually the one thing it does well, it's a 33 that it shares with Aisha's Care versus 29 on Nullify, and that does translate to an exact same 0.44 seconds ready speed, 0.39 ADS, and 0.43 stow speed. Reload speed is the lowest, 36 versus 40 versus 45. That is a 2.12 second reload time at base. Not great, but again, this is one of 2 heavy burst pulse rifles that can be crafted as well as being enhanced. So that is why the stat package gets to be a little bit lower. We can actually fine tune this to our liking here. And yeah, that reload speed has got to get higher. It is terrible here, but that's something that we can't fix with our barrels here. So let's quickly get to the barrels before we move on to our perks in column 2 here. I am honestly going fluted barrel. Again, that range band is perfectly fine for what this pulse rifle archetype excels at. I don't feel a need to go any further. 36 meters ADS before damage fall off. Again, it's a gradual steep in that fall off. It's not quite harsh, so I'm going to leave that range stat alone. 75 is more than enough for me, but fluted barrel, yeah, let's get that handling up. Let's get that stability up a little bit here. And then column 2, no rounds this time. None of our rounds perks. You get accurized rounds. I guess I shouldn't lie here. And steady rounds, but neither of those interest me right now. Again, my stability is okay for an M&K player, and as I said, I do not want to boost my range at all. We have tactical mag. We have flared magwell. Both of those are going to help out a little bit with a reload. We also have alloy magazine. I will probably need to play with this pulse rifle a little bit more. Again, I've unlocked it for collections purposes, but I don't know which one of those 3 options I want to go with. I generally lean tac mag because I like having the extra bullets. That's very nice here, but I may go alloy or flared depending on how slow the reload is here. There are some perks that are definitely going to help out with the reload speed. I'm just not sure which ones I'm going to land on, which is why I'm still kind of giving these options a look here. Moving on to column 3, we've got air trigger, pugilist, if you want to get up and close or use a ranged melee to take advantage of that, given that this is a long-range pulse rifle. Eddy current, again, pod favorite here. I've always stood beside Eddy Current. I've never said anything negative about it. Let that be known. We've got Enlightened Action. Already talked about that. Perpetual Motion. And then a very surprising High Impact Reserves in column 3. Yeah, I don't think we've seen that outside of... Was it the Last Wish weapon set? Is the only other obtainable set that gets a third column High Impact Reserves?
Yeah, it's very rare.
Fun little high. What are you doing here, perk? But yeah, High Impact Reserves in column 3, meaning we can pair that damage perk with some other damage perks in column 4. We've got High Ground, we've got Frenzy, we've got Swashbuckler, nice little pairing with Pugilist, again, if you want to be up and close with your heavy burst pulse rifle. We've got Volt Shot, we've got One for All, and we've got Focus Fury. Tons of damage options in column 4. I think if we are looking for the best pairing for High Impact Reserves, again, not that High Impact Reserves is something that we really think of as a PvE perk. You've got a pretty large magazine on this pulse rifle, so getting down to those lower values where the magazine really starts to, or where the bullets in High Impact Reserves start to do a good amount of damage, it's going to take you a while. So I would maybe think Frenzy would be probably the best pairing here. Get a passive damage perk that's just, constantly boosted a little bit by High Impact as you get to the bottom of the magazine. However, Frenzy is also giving you a plus 100 to the reload speed, so that when you do get to the end of the mag, those double damage perks aren't leaving you with just 8 base reload speed value, which would take quite a while on this weapon. So having that faster reload speed, again, with Frenzy active here, that reload becomes 1.5 seconds, which is much, much quicker, a little bit more suitable to general play here. Plus the high impact reserve bump at the end of the mag for even more damage. Yeah, I could see that happening. Of course, you don't have to do high impact reserves. We could do something else here if you wanted to make a bit of a better weapon. If you wanted to go with some boosts to, like, let's see here. I guess Frenzy's really taking care of a lot of the values that Enlightened Action brings. Perpetual Motion gives you a small bump to stability. I mean, even Eddy Current would be taken care of by a lot of what Frenzy brings to the table. Yeah, maybe, geez, I don't know. This is a tough one to kind of talk about because Frenzy really takes care of all the core issues that Column 3 tries to address.
Well, that's true if you run it Frenzy in the fourth column, but there's some other stuff there worth considering, I'd say.
Okay, enlighten me, Saint. What else are you considering running?
Well, at first it was all about it's all about Eddy Current and Volt Shot, right? But I've started to come around a little bit on Air Trigger, and I know this is again probably gonna to activate some strange looks from some of our listeners, but it really
and hosts.
It does so much for the reload speed. It's like a 20% scalar, and it also gives, I want to say, like plus 30 reload whenever you jump in the air. And with a weapon that has such bad reload speed, like if it's talking about the beginning of the show, or beginning of this review, I should say, it can really just put that reload speed all the way through the floor as far as like the time it takes goes. Even just having Alloy Mag on there, plus something like a reload speed masterwork, you're already looking at like 1.6 seconds. Well, if we take that to another 5%, I don't have the exact math in front of me, but yeah, adding on even more reload speed, a slightly higher scalar, you're getting under like 1.5 second territory, and that's pretty solid for something like Volt Shot. There's also, I would say, Frenzy's is absolute workhorse traits, maybe one of the best in the game. There also is One for All in this column, and I believe that Radial Area Transposer not only would act as damaging targets, but will also inherit traits, damage increases from High Ground, Frenzy, Swashbuckler, One for All, whatever it may be. So I don't know, maybe there's something there on the One for All if you want to just add a massive amount of damage, but then I would say if you're going One for All, I'm probably going Enlightened Action or something like that to make sure I've got hitting those stat boosts that you wouldn't be getting from Frenzy otherwise, because Frenzy does do so much. But yeah, Air Trigger, Volt Shot, there's something there, man. And I don't want to say it's better than Eddy Current, because Eddy Current, when you're amplified, is gonna max out your reload and put you at like a 1.04 second flat reload speed, which is ridiculously good. You just got to be a little bit more focused in on getting amplified, and that's just going to see a lot more benefit if you're activating that more often via arc, grenades and other things like that, whatever it may be on your prismatic or arc subclasses. But there's something there. It's worth a try, at least, I'll say.
Yeah, so over on Moss's sheet, I'm just having a look at the combatant multiplier for pulse rifles, which I think would still be the same for this being a heavy burst. It's actually quite high, at least for rank and file and elites. So that radial area pool will also be pretty high in terms of damage. I think we talked about this with the first act of weapons. And it's like, it's a kind of nice to have origin trait, but you might not necessarily see it out in practice. Maybe more kind of higher difficulty activities, you might see more of a use for this. But yeah, so for pulse rifles, it's pretty high, at least for rank and files and elites. So, and yeah, you are right in saying it will inherit the damage buff for, something like One for All or Swashbuckler or High Ground. For me, yeah, it very funny that you noticed that, Impetus, because that was the first thing I noticed because I lucked out and got a frenzy roll for this. I don't have this crafted yet, but when I looked at the perks, I was like, okay, this gets Frenzy. What else can I have this? I'm thinking, not a lot in column 3 because Frenzy takes care of everything. It is that workhorse perk that we do adore on this podcast. And what else could we really pick in column 3 that's already covered by Frenzy anyway? So like Frenzy is an option. I just feel like you'd kind of be forced to do something like high impact reserves, which is, sure, it's extra damage, but it does put you off. Someone like me, I am quite a compulsive reloader, so I might not get as much benefit with high impact reserves. So maybe something like Pugilist, but this is more of a longer range weapon. It's very like up in the air what I would go for in column 3 if I had Frenzy. But I think for me, I'm going to be crafting something like Eddy Current or Perpetual Motion with Volt Shot. Volt Shot's just, we talk about workhorse weapon perks like Frenzy, but so is Volt Shot. It's very easy to get, and if you can get that Eddy Current, very easy to get amplified if you're on a Arc subclass, but you can obviously get that on any subclass, specifically Arc and Prismatic. And that does give, basically, it boosts your reload almost up to 100 if you haven't picked anything else with the magazine perks. So, yeah, Volt Shot would be my pick. I've played around with this a little bit. It feels really good to fire. It's very, powerful. It's very chunky to fire, and hitting targets and just watching them die really fast is quite satisfying. So I can't wait to use this as kind of a more longer range Volt Shot build.
Yeah. Another thing I'll say about the Radiolaria Transposer is we've talked about the fact that the lingering pools can provide kind of middling benefit. Mm-hmm. I find that the explosion, I feel like I am getting more out of the explosion than I am out of the lingering pool, which is it's essentially free Dragonfly every third kill or every kill on an elite. And I want to say that initial explosion is also inheriting that damage scaler, which, as Court mentioned, is pretty high on pulse rifles. So I feel like that was my underrated part of that trait at first was, that pool's damaging over time is fine. Having them interact with stuff like shoot to loot is cool, very novelty, fun utility. But that actual explosion that is coming off of Corrasion is, man, it's nice.
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, that initial explosion, not talking about the actual pool, but the explosion that Saint's talking about is almost the same it's practically the same as a chain reaction explosion from a special weapon. Specifically, special weapons, heavy weapons are much larger damage, and it's much high. It's a higher damage. It's a larger radius, but for Transposer, it's 67.5 at base damage. Doesn't sound a lot, but that's prior to any activity, machinations, and multipliers being applied to it. Whereas special chain reaction is, I've lost it here now. It's 67.2 damage. So very close. It's just slightly higher than a special weapon chain reaction. We obviously know chain reaction got nerfed for special weapons. It got buffed for heavy weapons. So that's the kind of comparison that Saint's making here in terms of the explosion from the Radiolaria procking.
High impact reserves would boost the damage of the Radiolaria pool, right? Depending on how many bullets is in your bag.
Man, yeah, so if you had high impact, if you're getting a kill with the, towards the very bottom of the mag, you could be getting 15% from, high impact reserves and another 15% from Frenzy on that explosion.
I think I might do high impact. Yeah. Ooh. No, I want the reload bonus, so I think I will go high impact Frenzy.
Man, I think the fact that it's so hard to decide what you actually want to put on it, and the fact that I fully intend to craft at least 2 rolls of this, just says how good a weapon it is and how much viability there is in all its traits.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So high impact reserves when you enhanced it, it goes from 50% up to 55%. That's where the damage starts to ramp up. And it goes from, roughly speaking, 12.1% up to 25.6%. So if you can land that final blow with your last bullet, 25.6%, and then if you've got frenzy on top of that, that initial explosion from the radial area transposer plus the pool, we're doing quite serious damage. It's in terms of getting all those like moons, stars, and planets aligned to kind of make sure that like you kill the minor enemy near like a boss or a champion. It's realistically it's not going to happen, but it's extra damage, and we do love that kind of passive effect, especially in like PvE. A lot of content that we're playing has somewhat like a lot of ad dense activities in the game now, so it's going to work in our favor at some point.
Yeah, man. And if you could also go something like alloy mag and high impact reserves and one for all, if you put on maybe a reload masterwork, your reload speed's down at like 1.65 seconds, which is fine. And yeah, I mean, you're talking 35% from one for all, right? Not 30.
35%. Yep.
Yeah, bait and switch. Yeah, so 35% from that, and let's say you added in another, even just 15% from high impact reserves. You got a like 55% buffed explosion that just went off. And yeah, like Court said, probably not going to happen all the time, but holy shit, when it all comes together, things are going to explode.
But yeah, like I mean, that's I forgot about the kind of initial damage explosion effect of the origin trait. So that's to see it compared with chain reaction, which again we know was nerfed for special weapons specifically. It's not as potent as it once was. It's still a nice little explosion, and that's just a free origin trait, and it's the only thing you have in terms of an origin trait for this weapon specifically. But yeah, fun weapon. But I think the funnest weapon is coming up, lads. That is our third rocket frame pistol, which I will start us off. It is Aberrant Action. That is our solar sidearm rocket frame. And as a reminder, we've talked about it before, but this is our self-propelled rocket, and that projectiles explode on impact. Oh boy, I mean, we finally got our solar option. We've got our arc. We had our strand at the start of this season. We now have solar. So we are obviously going to pair it with those versus the Call, which is from the Pale Heart, and Indebted Kindness, which is from Warlord's Ruin, which is still the recent dungeon. So you can still go and farm it until you get your Volt Shot lead from gold roll. So like all of these weapons are very readily available. So it's tough competition up against its direct competitor in the same slot, which is Indebted Kindness. The Call is obviously our only rocket pistol in our top slot, so that gets a bit of a free card, free pass, I should say, compared to its direct competitor here with Indebted Kindness. So blast radius of 35 versus 31 versus 35. So it's the exact same as Indebted Kindness. It's the same for velocity, 56 versus 60 versus 56. The range here, which I think we're all going to just agree this is a bit of a bug, it's base 0 versus 30 versus 25. I'm assuming it's supposed to be somewhere like 20, 25. Not that much really matters, because the range stat on a rocket pistol isn't doing much for you. There hasn't been too much significant testing, but in terms of, there's not like a damage fall off in terms of like aiming down sight or anything like that. So it's still a little bit of testing go behind the scenes, but you having 0 range doesn't impact any of the important stats when it comes to a rocket pistol. But yeah, going to toss it up to being likely a bug, and based on the testing done by Hugo and the DPS servers, just no effect on damage values at different distances regardless. But over on the stability, same again, it's 48 versus 35 versus 48. handling 45 versus 40 versus 45. We don't have any info on ready/ADS/stow speeds at the moment, but with this being, it's a pistol, or sorry, I should say a sidearm. It's not going to be. It's not going to be too long in terms of aiming down sight, and it's the same for reloads. At least in my experience, it's with this being a sidearm, you're not expecting to have super long reload speeds, but the reload is 28 versus 35 versus 28, so it's the exact same stats, barring range with Indebted Kindness. It's direct competitor. Recoil direction, not that, again, it doesn't really matter here, but it being a projectile based weapon, is 60. So identical, practically speaking, identical to Indebted Kindness. The big difference here is obviously what you want to pair the perks with. Obviously in columns 3 and 4 are the most important ones. Before we get into that, Indebted Kindness still readily available, but it's one of the few weapons that are not enhanceable. So the only dungeon weapons that are enhanceable are the Refresh Prophecy ones. Warlord's Rune and the Dungeon's Sin's Prophecy are not enhanceable. We're not sure when they will be, but this will be our first second slot or middle slot weapon that we can enhance our perks. So practically, like objectively speaking, that will give a slight edge to Aberrant Action. Certainly not disputing that Indebted Kindness is gone, it's washed, it's completely useless at this point. It's definitely not. I'm still using Indebted Kindness, but Aberrant Action's got that kind of one up because it can be crafted and obviously enhanced. So I spoke about at least in column 1, I spoke kind of what do I want to focus on when it comes to a sidearm, and I still think I'm convinced of a kind of blast radius kind of focused sidearm. Maybe these lads will chip in later on and just kind of see what they feel. But for me, with a rocket sidearm, I'm focused on bumping up that blast radius. So we've got volatile launch, which gives us that plus 15 blast radius, but it does mean a minus 5 velocity and handling. You got confined launch, which is plus 15 stability, minus 10 velocity, but 10 plus blast radius. You do have some other options. If you don't necessarily want to go down the blast radius, you do have quick launch, which is our kind of bog standard go-to, which is plus 10 velocity and plus 15 handling. Over on column 2, again, it's really a toss-up of, do you want to have a little bit more velocity with more reload speed, but at a detriment to your magazine size? Do you want to reduce your blast radius but have increased velocity and stability with implosion rounds? Or you've got your typical magazine perks like Tactical Mag that does give you a slight bump to your magazine. You've got plus 10 to your reload speed, plus 5 to your stability. You've got Appended Mag, which just gives you an extra a few bullets into your magazine. Extended Mag, that really brings down your reload speed by minus 20, but it does give you increased magazine as well as airborne effectiveness. So really it's a toss-up. Do you want more magazine or do you want more like blast radius? And we also got high explosive ordnance with that plus 5 velocity and plus 10 blast radius. I know on D2 Foundry it's not dynamically really changing the magazine, but I do have a few weapons where I think high explosive ordnance did bring it down to 10 in the mag. Don't quote me on this, but it will change your magazine. I know it's not currently saying that on D2 Foundry, but there is a dynamic kind of sway between, if you want more blast radius, you will need to forfeit your magazine a little bit. You can bump that up a little bit with your backup mag in the weapon mod slot. Comms 3 and 4, though, this being our first solar rocket pistol, I think everyone's obviously choosing Heel Clip and Incandescent. That is your go-to supreme solar selection. And it's the one that I went for. Heel Clip with that cure times 2 to yourself, and then cure times 1 to your allies within 50 meters. It's just such a great perk to have. It then obviously triggers a lot of complementary, supplementary perks with the solar sandbox. You've got Incandescent, which is just still a really great perk. I don't think it's as powerful as Volt Shot or Jolt, but you can really like cascade that explosion. It applies 30 scorch stacks. You can then pair that with your solar sandbox, and Ember Ashes brings it up to 40 stacks. So Heal Clip, Incandescent. Or you can go for more of a utility role. We've got Strategist, we've got Pugilist, we've got Fuel Prep in column 3. Beacon rounds, I know I don't tend to use a lot, but I know some people do value the stronger projectile tracking for a few seconds, and dealing damage does extend that duration with this. So beacon rounds is an option. You've got threat detector there as well. You've also got ambitious assassin. So if you think you want some more extra, you want more in your magazine with ambitious assassin, then it is there as well. Honestly, with column 3, at least personally for me, beacon rounds being the least sought after perk, you've got some solid options. In column 4, the ones that I'm focusing on, obviously Incandescent, Swashbuckler's there, Demo is also there, and Golden Tricorn is there. So you've got some really great damage perks. But for me personally, I'm still going to go for that Heal Clip and Incandescent roll. Saint, is there anything I have missed with our new solar sidearm here?
I'm definitely with you on the blast radius stuff. I'm a big believer in pumping up the blast radius stat, even going so far as to using volatile launch on the one for all call roll that I have used so much. Attack mag for the ammo, and then I also would consider there's a couple things I would consider in column 3. I don't think there's any denying Incandescent. We were just talking about the explosions from Radiolaria Transposer. Now, Incandescent, you enhance it, you put on ashes, you're getting, I'm going to say 45 stacks of Scorch. You're getting a few kills there. By the time you get the third kill, not only is it enough to ignite anything else that might have taken Scorch stacks from the first view, it's also going to explode via Radiolaria Transposer and to continue to take damage, which is ridiculous and very fun. No doubt that is my pick for column 4. But column 3, I would say I consider Strategist, because I am addicted to the Exodus chess piece for Titans, and Strategist
Okay.
It just has that flow, right? And it's only giving 10 or 11% for class ability energy, because it's like a primary, essentially, is the way that it's treated. And same goes for like Pugilist. But man, getting that class energy ability bump is really nice, and it just gets that flow, especially when you're dashing or you're putting down your rally barricade and you're getting that bump to your rocket sidearm's damage, and then you use the rocket sidearm to get more kills, which gives you more, class ability energy. The loop there is really solid. And yeah, I don't know, maybe Fuel Prep would be like final pick, just because just ammo, just making it even easier to use this thing as a primary weapon or in a double special loadout. Yeah, it's ridiculously fun.
I thought about Fuel Prep with the sidearm, but at least specifically, I use Fuel Prep because of the inventory size stats, not necessarily for the reload, which is just a great bonus anyway. But because, in my experience with the Call and Indebted Kindness, I've never really had a big issue with ammo. So like that's why I didn't really pivot towards Fuel Prep. I mean, Heal Clip's my go-to anyway, but if I was to go for something else, I would go for Pugilist with your Titan Rocket Man build is definitely a fun one. Or sorry, I should say Strategist, not Pugilist, is a really fun build for Titans. But Fuel Prep's certainly not my alternative.
Maybe like
choice.
Only if you're going to be running double special frequently. Yeah, probably the only way that's really going to be a top pick, right?
Yeah, if you're using the Call and Aberrant Action.
Yeah.
That's exactly my line of thinking, and that's why I'm going to be putting Field Prep on it. I want to make sure that I never run out of bullets. The other thing, too, of course, with our other two rocket sidearms is that I have led from gold on those.
Yeah.
Which does not show up on these. And that's a big reason why I'm also not running out of special ammo on those other two, is because I'm also getting ammo from heavy bricks. With this, I don't have that luxury. I don't have the ability to pick up ammo from anything other than this weapon, and so I want to make sure that I am juicing the reserves on this. And enhanced field prep is one of the enhanced traits that is absolutely worth the Ascendant alloy. It's a very, very strong option. And again, rocket sidearms are getting a bump to their reserves. It's not going to be a huge bump to their reserves with our August patch, but they are getting a bump to the reserves with the changes that are coming with Solstice. So I will certainly take that bonus. I think with enhanced field prep on top of that, I'll be looking at a weapon that should hold up to my lead from gold rocket sidearms as well. And yeah, I'll be putting incandescent on there. I'm not going to go, I'm not with you guys on the blast radius. I'm a velocity guy here. I like making sure that the rockets reach their target as quickly as possible, especially if it's a fast moving target. So quick launch for me. I will probably do a handling masterwork and then tac mag as well to combo with field prep.
Yeah, that's very fair. I think there's definitely pros and cons for having like pivoting towards blast radius or pivoting towards velocity. I think that's kind of back and forth. I've kind of went back and forth. I'm currently in the vibe of blast radius just to kind of really maximize, but I can see why velocity stat if you want to go down that path. I'm just looking at the magazine size. Again, shout out to Mossy with his spreadsheet for inventory size stat. So yeah, I mentioned D2 Foundry's not reacting dynamically when I'm picking through the magazine. Its base stat, it says on D2 Foundry it's 12. It's not actually, it's 10 in game. High explosive ordnance, I mentioned, it does lower your magazine count at the expense of having a higher blast radius. It brings it down to 9. Tac mag is 11. If you pair high explosive plus backup mag, it's 12. Appended, it's 12. Extended mag goes up to I think it goes up to 13, and then once you start pairing backup mag, tac mag, it goes up to 14, and extended mag plus field prep or backup mag goes up to 16. So extended mag does dumpster your reload speed, but if you pair that with field prep, then it kind of negates it anyway, with the plus 55 with enhanced plus the reload scaler. So, 16 in the magazine is quite enough if we're only really using backup mag in PvE these days until they rework the system again. But yeah, in terms of field prep, again, this is just at base. I'm not going to go through the full list, but 46 at base, no field prep, and it goes up to 53 total ammo capacity with field prep, and then 56 with enhanced field prep. So you're getting plus 10 with enhanced field prep. Again, just at base with the total ammo capacity.
I'll take it.
Yeah, it's a free mag plus, more per brick like we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, yep. But a very fun weapon. I think all of these weapons have been fairly fun, but I think the... as we've listed them, as we went through them this episode, Corrasion and especially Aberrant Action are just a ton of fun. I think you mentioned at the start of the episode saying just when you aim down the sight and the sight opens up, that little animation, it's just really cool to watch.
Yeah.
I think they've just done a really great job, and rocket sidearms continue to grow stronger and stronger. I wonder what they'll do with a void and a stasis rocket sidearm.
Remember trace rifles?
Who?
Yeah.
All right, lads. Any last comments before we wrap things up?
A lot of juicer weapons here.
I think for getting people back after that first slump from Act 1 of Episode 1, they did a good job of getting good weapons, specifically for our Corrasion and our Aberrant Action. Perfect Paradox, I'm assuming, is going to be interesting once it's obtainable. Don't know when that is, but yeah, those are definitely fun weapons to play with. Looks like they've got, some idea of how to spread the weapon pool out. I know that's not everyone's favorite thing, but yeah, for getting people back in for Act 2. They've timed it right with the rocket sidearm and a heavy burst pulse rifle.
Definitely. All right. Well, that is it for episode 110. Obviously want to thank our audio engineer, Autodidactos, including our patrons and all you listeners that have been listening in. Some great weapons the last couple of episodes. Next week, we'll be covering the Salvation's Edge raid. So we'll have some encounter tips, we've got some builds, and we'll be breaking down some of those fancy looking weapons. We've mentioned them quite a few times in this episode and the last couple of episodes. And don't worry, prismatic and exotic class item enjoyers, we'll be covering them soon. Not next episode, but in a future episode. It's coming very, very soon. My name's Court. You can find me over on social media as Court Projects, in the Discord as the same name. You can find my infographics and spreadsheet over in the Destiny spreadsheets link tree, along with many other great applications, spreadsheets, and stuff that enhances your Destiny experience. Impetus, where can we find you?
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Discord and in Destiny, where I'll be chasing red borders for our Act 2 weapons specifically, and hiding under the Pod versus Enemies Twitter handle for our show. Saint, where can our listeners find you?
Yep, you can find me at Saint_Kabir, social media, hanging out in the Discord server, talking about builds and new weapon rolls, and farming some GMs as I mentally recover from my time in the competitive PvP playlist this coming week. Thanks for listening to another episode of PvE.